Hello, on camera. You're such a wonderful person. But you got problems. You know what I just realized? I started combining songs there. That was like a low rematch right there, remix. I'm singing. What was I singing? Breaking Glass. I blanked out, but that was the guitar lick from Speed of Life, the opening track. So I was kind of all over the place with that one. But Rob, how you doing?
All I have to say is that I will sit right down, waiting for the gift of sound.
Sound and vision. All right.
That one was
See you
more in
next
my
time,
range,
guys.
so I had to go
Bye.
for it. I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How about you, buddy?
Midway through the Bowie series, we were on video, guys. Anybody who saw our Rock and Roll Hall of Fame rant video knows that we are now able to record video, and we were just kind of joking off camera that it's like, geez, before the pandemic, kind of didn't know about Zoom. Now we do, so it's making our lives easier in terms of video, because we've been wanting to do that since the beginning, is have on YouTube video, and then for the podcast services just have the audio. So
yeah, so it only took us a year to finally figure out how to do the video portion, and that just goes to show how much you and I are just the biggest dopes probably.
If you're an audiophile,
but that's okay.
If you're an audiophile kind of person, you're like a little picky with that. The audio quality on the podcast versions will be a little bit better because obviously, I'm recording it and Andy is like through like it's his recording off of the internet, so it's not as high quality. I try to do like some pretty meticulous editing when I can on the audio front. So if you would rather have better quality audio, just check out this episode on, as we always plug, Anchor, Spotify, what is it? Apple
Music, or
Music,
any
all of them. We're on
any podcast app you use. But if you want to see our beautiful faces, then there you go.
And if you're listening, then go to YouTube. We're here. So interesting that we are now able to do this, starting with this album. It's pretty interesting because it's kind of a new era of Bowie.
New era of Bowie, new era of sound and music. So there you go. Yep. Definitely a good episode to start this transition. But if you guys haven't figured it out already, we are talking about the Low album, the first album in what is considered the Berlin trilogy, which would coincide with Heroes and then followed by Lodger as well. Of course, we're going to be talking about both of those records. Well, I guess after this episode, right? They're the next two. Duh. But before we get into Low, I got to ask. Tell the viewers, what are you drinking? What are you drinking today?
Back to my lame ass here. We always record after I get out of work. So this is a very large cup of black tea. Again, to quote Picard, I will do it every time. Tea, Earl Grey, hot.
I get that Star Trek reference in.
Yeah.
I'll be having the tea myself later tonight, but I am going with a beer again. I'm gonna show it. Fuck it. I'm gonna show it. Sam Adams Rebel IPA.
I'm glad you like IPAs.
I'm an IPA boy. My favorite Sam Adams, and I got a water bottle as well. So.
And a new segment, since we are now on video. What shirt are we wearing today? Mine is this pretty awesome Pink Floyd shirt that I got. I don't know about you, when it comes to band shirts, I like one of two things. One, like either a really amazing album cover from the band, or just as long as the band themselves are in the photo, I always kind of gravitated more towards those shirts. So what I like about this is that it kind of has the best of both worlds. You get, kind of cool like little portrait of, the four dudes in Floyd inside the Dark Side of the Moon prism. But then my favorite part of it, which unless you are a big Floyd fan, you won't recognize, is the saucer full of secrets, Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Yep. So
you've got all sorts of different Floyd references going on there.
Well, I believe this photo is from the Inside the Dark Side of the Moon manual. At least I remember.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
So and of course, you got the prism, which is of course Dark Side of the Moon, and I didn't even notice that was the font from Saucer Full of Secrets. So there you go.
Yep, pretty cool, right?
Well, so it just so happens I'm wearing a band shirt as well.
Mm-hmm.
You may have heard of them. You may have recalled us doing a whole discography discussion about them. Shout out to season 1, Sound and Music. King Crimson,
Oh, nice.
Look at that. Look at that with the mic in the way. This is a very old shirt. I've had this shirt for probably about 10 years now. But yeah, it's a very phased out in the court of the Crimson King.
I actually remember when you got that shirt. Anyway, this isn't about shirts, but I thought it would be interesting to put two of my favorite bands here. Excellent.
Well, it's funny. Maybe now that we're on video, speaking of show and tell, I get to do one of these now.
Ooh, nice. So now we have the Low vinyl album.
So we've got a first pressing of Low on vinyl, the record we are going to be talking about today.
Don't have that one.
And of course, we've got this fine 2017 remaster as well.
Very nice. Very nice. That's one that I wish I had.
All right, but enough of that for realsies this time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually have just about at this point every Bowie, so when I say every Bowie record, I mean from Space Oddity to Scary Monsters. So from that span, I have every single one on vinyl, with the exception of Young Americans and Heroes.
Wow.
Just missing those two. So I get those in my collection. And both the Space Oddity and Man Who Sold the World versions I have are the alternate covers. So the Space Oddity is sort of like that hazy psychedelic background with the close-up of his face. It kind of looks like more like Ziggy, Bowie, which album cover I'm talking about. I think it's the one he used for the thumbnail, actually, for that episode. And then the Man Who Sold the World one is the black background with just Bowie playing guitar. I think he's got his one foot in the air. I don't know.
Cool. Nice.
Image I'm talking about, but that's one of the alternate covers for that record. So those are the editions I have.
Very nice.
Yeah, man. But without further ado, I say we get into this album.
Low, let's do it.
You ready? All right, folks, if you see my head turning this way, it's because I'm looking at my notes, all right? I don't have the shit memorized. The one nice thing about, not being on camera, I suppose. But, all right, so we are going to talk about the Low record.
Low.
Low is the 11th studio album by English singer-songwriter David Bowie, released on the 14th of January, 1977 by RCA Records. Recorded following Bowie's move to West Berlin after a period of drug addiction and personal instability. Low was the first of 3 collaborations with Brian Eno and producer Tony Visconti, later termed the Berlin Trilogy. Although this record was mostly recorded in France. Out of the 3, I believe Heroes was actually the only one that was all the sessions were solely recorded in Berlin. Parts of Lodger and Low were in Berlin, other parts of Europe, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to talk about it as we talk about this record. I feel that this is either one of the man's most important records, or possibly his most important record in his discography. Of course, this was a stylistic change, going more towards electronic and ambient sound approaches, with a lot of German influence, specifically krautrock groups such as Tangerine Dream, Boy, Kraftwerk, Can, Harmonia. While this was going on, Bowie was also working with Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop was part of these Low sessions that we're also going to talk about throughout, but was also recording Iggy's first 2 solo records, The Idiot and Lust for Life, both very much in the vein, sound, and style of this period. If you are a fan of the Berlin era of Bowie, I highly, highly, highly recommend you check out The Idiot and Lust for Life, Iggy Pop's first 2 solo records. Can you tell I'm excited to talk about this one?
Oh, yeah. Please, go
no, that's all I got for now. Give us the band personnel, and then we'll get into it track by track, and we'll talk about everything as far as this record goes.
Okie dokie. So the personnel list is a bit long, so I'm just going to try to really be, especially with the instruments everybody plays. But first of all, we have Mr. Bowie on vocals, saxophone, guitar, pump bass, harmonica, vibraphone, xylophone, prearranged percussion, and lots of other stuff. I'm not going to read it all. There's a ton. Brian Eno is also on this. He plays keyboards, Mini Moog, the ARP, EMS, Synthi AKS, listed as EMI, piano, Chamberlin, synthesizers, vocals, guitar treatments, synthetics, and instruments. Carlos Alomar plays rhythm guitar and lead guitar on a few of the tracks, not all of them. Dennis Davis plays percussion. George Murray plays bass. They kind of vary in terms of what tracks they play on, but I'm not going to specify too much here because we'll be here all day. Ricky Gardner plays rhythm guitar and lead guitar on a few songs. Roy Young plays piano and the Farfisa organ. Love the Farfisa organ, by the way. And the additional musicians is one guy you just mentioned, Iggy Pop, who does some backing vocals. Mary Visconti, who I assume is Tony
Visconti's wife at the time.
Yep, did backing vocals on a couple tracks. Edward Mayer played cello on one track, and Peter and Paul played pianos and ARP. And they are Peter Robinson and Paul Buckmaster, for those who want to know who helped work with Bowie on the Man Who Fell to Earth soundtrack. And the cover is from, I think you mentioned this last time, isn't the cover from the movie as well? The Man Who Sold, or the Man
I
Who
believe
Fell to Earth?
both. Yeah, the cover from this album as well, the Station to Station, I believe are both from The Man Who Fell to Earth. The Man Who Fell to Earth. Can't talk today. Yeah, and actually some of these songs, we'll mention them as we go through each track. Some of these songs were supposedly, and we're going to use the word supposedly loosely, because if you remember from the last episode, we talked about that we're still coming off of that cocaine binge that started with Young Americans and Station to Station. So everyone's memory during this period is very fuzzy, especially as indicated in the one Bowie book I've been reading. But some of the songs were originally recorded for that soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, to answer your original question, the album cover I do believe is from that film.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, dude. Let's get into it then, track by track. Starting with track 1, side 1, Speed of Life. So I think this is such an odd way to open the album, but I love it at the same time. As I was going back and listening to this record, I was reading online that apparently this song faintly recalls the chorus of the Gene Genie, which I was like, but if you do listen to it, you do kind of hear it a little bit. And I think that's kind of interesting because a lot of what I get from side 1, which by the way, we should mention, side 1 is the more arty pop side with lyrics, where side 2 has always been known as the ambient side. And we'll get into that a little later. But I've always kind of got that, like, the theme of this record was sort of like looking back at the past, but also kind of like figuring out where you're at now, hence, moving to Berlin and kind of, getting your life together, starting over. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it kind of, you heard some of the, what was the chorus of the Gene Genie.
I never noticed that myself. Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. What I really love about this song is I love the juxtaposition of both the buzzing synthesizer, which we get a lot of that throughout this record, as well as the guitar. It sort of is like the sonic, like, manifesto, if you will. It's bombastic, it's minimal at parts. Like I said, while on, I think it's such a cool way to open up the record.
Yeah, and it definitely indicates that this is a new era for sure. Like, just the sound of the song, of the track itself, it's a nice little, like, kind of opening intro piece.
It's like already nothing we've never heard before, right?
Yeah.
And even coming off of Station to Station.
The only thing that would even come close to it would be maybe that title track off of Station to Station. But even then, it's still, the sound is still very much its own,
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think of the track itself, though?
I think it's good. Bowie has this way of making sort of the inaccessible accessible, if that makes sense. And what I mean is just that you take an instrumental piece like this, which is, it's very, very, like, obviously you can tell that there's like a lot of electronic influences in it. like you said, it's got that kind of weird juxtaposition of guitar mixed with sort of electronic elements. But he, at the same time, not only blends them well together, but makes them kind of accessible to sort of the average listener. Like it's almost like a, not a pop song, but it has that it kind of reminds me of that same formula, but done in a weird experimental style. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say there. It's because it's a catchy tune,
Absolutely, it's a catchy tune.
The riff gets stuck in your head,
And there's no melody, there's no vocals,
Yeah.
and yet it's so catchy. I find that I have this. I think this and like YYZ are like the two instrumentals, and I'm always singing in my head. Like you said, it's really catchy. You just made me think too that this is definitely this is another example. We've talked about this relentlessly already during this series. Is always a chameleon, right? This record's no exception. It's very clear. Maybe it's not very clear to this one because he's taking a lot of what was underground influence at the time. But you're hearing what he was listening to, but yet he's making it his own too.
Yeah, and he's also giving you kind of a peek of what's to come in popular music in the next couple of years.
Absolutely, and I don't want to. I was going to say this more for my final thoughts, so I won't go too crazy yet. But I mean, this record to me set the way for post-punk music. Post-punk is literally right around the corner. I mean, 1977, you had some of the greatest debut albums of all time from all these post-punk guys: Elvis Costello, the Talking Heads, the list goes on. And I think this record really pioneered that sound, what became later on post-punk, because post-punk borrows a lot of those styles of music that we hear on this particular record.
Yeah.
So this song, while odd, definitely sets the stage for what's to come.
Yeah, and also not just beyond post-punk, like you get into more like art rock and new wave. Even I think at times this record hints at that, but
yeah.
Again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself.
Anything else to add for Speed of Life?
It's a good opening track. I like it a lot.
Yeah, cool. All right, so then let's move on to track 2, Breaking Glass. Best way I can summarize this song is it's
short and sweet.
It's short and sweet. It's a bizarre song fragment, because that's what it is. It's a fragment that just works. It works.
It reminds me of some of those like King Crimson pieces from kind of later in their career, how they had those little
interesting, some like the little like segs and stuff. Yeah. Well, it's funny that you said that, because I was reading in this Bowie book that I'm reading that Tony Visconti. I can't talk today. Tony Visconti said that Bowie was suffering writer's block from this period. It was Eno that said to him, turn every circumstance to your advantage. Every idea, every circumstance to your advantage. Don't normalize it. Keep it strange. Bowie intended to, shaping up some of the lyrics. I believe even add another line, if I remember correctly. And Eno's like, no, don't do it. Keep it as it is. This is so weird and radical. Keep it as is. I just found that really fascinating. I think the importance of Eno during this era was detrimental. And I love the partnership that Brian Eno had with Bowie and Visconti during this time period. It sort of reminds me of the relationship that he would develop 1 year later with the Talking Heads as well, too. I love this song. Yeah, it's bizarre. I just think it's so cool. Again, you've got those buzzing synthesizers bleeping in and out. And it's under 2 minutes.
yeah, it's also got that guitar sound too, which is, again, I don't know. Let me see which guitarist plays on that track. Just give me a second.
I love his vocals in this song too.
Yes, I do too. Okay, yep. Ricky Gardner plays that kind of interesting sort of riff in the song. It's good. I also feel like with this and a couple other tracks, particularly there's definitely, well, the next track and definitely the next track, there's a little tiny remnant left of that sound that he was really prominent in Young Americans that I think carried over to
Wait,
Station a bit. Like maybe a little
think
tiny remnant. There's still a little bit of that kind of the way he was structuring kind of the more
with this particular track.
A little bit with this one, but definitely more on one of the other tracks, which I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I heard a little bit that really on all the most of the tracks with vocals on this album.
Yeah, and speaking of Ricky Gardner, because you mentioned him, I was gonna wait for another song. Underrated guitarist, right? Especially when we're talking about Bowie. I know this is another thing we've gone on about already. I mean, this man's worked with some of the guitar greats, and still will as we get through the rest of the discography. I don't need to mention the names, but I will anyways. Mick Ronson, Robert Fripp, Carl Zalomar, who's on this record as well. But I don't know about you, if you're going back and listening to this album, and I haven't looked into Ricky Gardner yet, this guy has to be influenced by Robert Fripp. Has to be influenced by Robert Fripp.
Yeah, and I noticed what was interesting about this album, and I definitely noticed it on this song, was that actually the electronic stuff in it, like the electronic instrumentation, definitely dominates, but if you're actually paying attention to the guitar, there's some very interesting things going on with the guitar, and I think probably in this song it's the most prominent.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of some of the stuff Fripp did a few years prior with Eno. Some of those collaborations they did, I'm blanking on the names. Evening Star was the second one, and I can't remember the name of the first album at the moment, but it sort of reminds me of that a little bit. So I don't know. But yeah, man, just another great song. Again, so far, both of these two songs are very odd. It's an opening track and a track two, but they're great, and it sounds, again, it's nothing like we've heard him do before. Which brings us to track three. What in the world? I got to read this to you. I read this on Wikipedia, and maybe the only time in my life I'll compliment Wikipedia. But I think the sound of this song is described in this Wikipedia article perfectly. Ready? A blimp-like sound comparable to the sounds later made by Pac-Man and the Nintendo Entertainment System pulses throughout the song, which, coupled with extremely rhythmic guitar solos, creates a frantic pace.
There's a couple of songs on here that's funny you mentioned that, and that's just because, I mean, I know we've talked about this before, but we're both pretty big gamers.
Yeah.
There's definitely a few tracks on here that have reminded me of, like, this be good for like a video game soundtrack, particularly some of the instrumentals. But yeah, that kind of blipping sound is very interesting. But it also reminds me of some of our wonderful krautrock friends who very much influenced a lot of this album. That sound effect could be on a Tangerine Dream album or something maybe like a Kraftwerk album too. A lot of these electronic textures, and you'll have to forgive me that I'm blanking out on some of like where some of them are, but overall on the whole album, there's times I'll listen, I'm like, this I can hear the Kraftwerk influence here. I can hear the Can influence here. So this is another one where like that blipping and those electronic effects really reminded me of, some Tangerine Dream.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear those German influences for sure. I don't know how well you know them, but one of my favorite bands is the Flaming Lips, and this song kind of reminds me of like a proto Flaming Lips song in the sense that it's fun and catchy, but it's so paranoid sounding. Like, again, I feel the insecurity in this song. This record, it's just a cold record, It really is. It's so catchy.
Yeah, it's that weird sort of dichotomy of, especially with a song like this, I think the vocal melody, and maybe not the vocals themselves. I love, first of all, actually, on that note, I do like his kind of the way he sings the song.
Yeah.
Like his vocals on this track is really, really good. But there's a weird kind of, at times on this album, dichotomy between kind of not happy melodies, but more upbeat melodies, but a darker tone underneath, which I really love that, you know. I like
Yeah.
that kind of jarring dichotomy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's well said. This was the song too when you were reading the personnel that Iggy does backing vocals on. I don't know if that's him or Eno in the chorus. The wait until the crowd cries, because it sounds like Eno doing the higher vocals, but the lower pitch is definitely Iggy. But I didn't see anything about Eno doing vocals for this song specifically. I know he does a lot of the backing vocals throughout this album, and some of the tracks, it's definitely more prominent. You can tell that it's him. But this one, I'm not sure. But it's cool to hear Iggy on this one. This one definitely feels like it could have fit perfectly on The Idiot as well. Again, making, those comparisons with those two Iggy records, all around the same time period for sure. But yeah, man, this is just another one. Catchy, dark. It works.
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
works. So that brings us to the big one. Track 4, Sound and Vision. I love this song.
Yeah, it's cliche. Like, sometimes I'm okay with, like, first of all, I never don't like something just because it's popular, I don't like that. I feel like people should either like something, or not like it based on their own, objective opinion or subjective. Just basically, if it sounds good to you, you should like it, whether it gets played like constantly on the radio or whether it's some deep track. But I can honestly say this is, like, I know it's one of his more popular songs. It really is one of the best songs on the record. I feel like it's a hit
without a doubt.
And
without a doubt.
It's certainly probably this, and oddly enough, the first track, probably the catchiest tune on the record. And yeah, I don't know. I thought you might appreciate this, but when I first heard, when I was first getting into Bowie and I had that 2-disc Best of Bowie set, this was the only song off of this album. Sound and Vision was the only one off of the Best of album. And actually, I didn't really like it too much at first. This was a grower for me, over maybe the first year or so. But once it grew on me, it became one of my absolute favorite Bowie songs. So
interesting. Yeah, this one has, as far back as I can remember getting into Bowie, this one has always been a favorite. Interesting enough, this one in the UK, this was his biggest single since Sorrow, the cover he did off of Pinups a few years back.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The US, it did a chart. I think the US, it charted like number 63 or something I had read. But when Bowie went to submit the record to RCA, they're like, yeah, no, we're not putting this out. Like, what the fuck is this? I guess convinced them to put it out. I don't know. But this, this ended up being a pretty successful single. Like, not one of his biggest, but I mean, number 3 is still pretty big on the UK charts. And the album ended up outselling Station to Station, which I think is interesting because Golden Years was a pretty big single for its time. Record, even upon release, did very well. The song Sound and Vision itself, I think, sort of gained a second life in 1990 when Bowie was taking a break touring with Tin Machine. He did the Sound and Vision tour, which, if you're not familiar with the Sound and Vision tour, it was Bowie's attempt to do a whole tour just playing the hits pretty much one last time, type of thing. So he named it the Sound and Vision tour, put out a box set called the Sound and Vision box set. So the song kind of developed a second life. 1991 remix came out that's not that great, by the way. But what's interesting about that tour is, he played all the hits one last time and then kind of took a break with stuff throughout the 90s. But the song came back in like the early 2000s during the Heathen tour. There's a couple really good live versions of him performing that. But as far as the song goes, I just think, I really do think, while it's not my favorite song on the record. There's one other one I would put above it. I think from a recording standpoint, this is one of his best pieces of music. What him, Tony, and Eno laid out on this track is just, I think, pure production. These last few years, I've really have been getting more of appreciation for production. Mm-hmm. Whether it's something like a song like Good Vibrations and some of the stuff that Brian Wilson did with that song, or even just growing an appreciation for George Martin and the things he did with the Beatles. You listen to this song, clean slate, you're not doing anything else, good headphones, just listen to this song and just listen to what's going on. And just this, from the sonic textures to the the stereo separation of the instrumentation throughout. I know I'm just sounding like a pretentious audiophile, but really just the recording of this song is just so good. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like it could have been recorded today in 2020.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's definitely a very well produced song. I would agree. And
yeah, it really is. And it's another one that, while it's very experimental, it's catchy. You know, I mean, we were singing the chorus in the beginning of the episode with our little low remix there. But
and this is the song I was talking about. I think probably more than anyone still has a hint of that that kind of soul-y funk kind of sound. He even has like the chorus or the backup singers there a little bit. The do.
Which that's Mary Visconti, by the way.
Oh, okay, that's Mary Visconti. Okay.
Yeah, that's her. But yeah, I mean, what I also think is interesting about this song is this is one of the songs where the vocals were recorded last, as well as the lyrics being written. Mm-hmm. They had the instrumentals. They even had the do, vocals, the backing vocals in general, recorded. And then David came in and just, I think it was like a couple of takes. They did the song and you got Sound and Vision. Yeah, man, I don't know what else to say about this song. This is just one of those songs. I just think it's brilliant. I just think this is one of the greatest recordings ever.
Oh yeah, the riff's great. The chorus is great. His vocals are really, really great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just, and it's kind of amazing with the rest of this album. Like, yeah, this was the hit, and first of all, I'm actually kind of amazed that it became a hit. Just that really any song of this album became a hit. But again, that
why this one specifically?
Huh?
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I was just asking why this one specifically were you surprised?
Oh, well, just because of the overall sound of the album. I mean, mm-hmm. Sound and Vision has that, like I said, it definitely still has that poppiness to it, but it's still strange enough where it's kind of, it's still, I would call it more of like an outlier sort of pop song. It's not really, it's certainly not, My Baby Done Left Me kind of thing. It's definitely definitely more eccentric, but at the same time, it's a super catchy song, and it's even cooler. Like, it still has a lot of those same cool kind of electronic textures to it, and I don't know, really like the riff. It's a great song.
Let me ask you this. This is another classic me putting you on the spot, just like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame episode. What do you think the song's about, in your opinion?
Oh God. I have to think about the lyrics now. I'm not really sure. Like, I couldn't even tell you.
It definitely ties into what I think the theme of this record is, like mm-hmm. I was saying before, with, looking back on the past and looking back on, could have I done this differently type of thing, and, where I'm at now. But with this one specifically, I've never really been able to pinpoint it.
Yeah, I don't know whether he's trying to be, if he's talking figuratively or literally, like if he's actually talking about, trying to think of the lyrics now.
Well, like I was just, I was thinking of, here we go. Like the first line in the chorus, blue, blue, electric blue, that's the color of my room where I will live. Blue, blue.
Yeah, now actually,
like
that's
could be interpreted. Yeah, so that could be interpreted like his, him, kind of getting a feel of his new surroundings. Pale blind, pale blinds, drawn all day, nothing to do, nothing to say. I always interpret that as, again, he's trying to get clean off drugs. What do I do now? I can't go store cocaine. I
Yeah,
can't,
it's almost like if he'll sit right down, waiting for the gift to sound. It's like almost like he's kind of looking, like waiting for a revelation that is going to help
yes.
him to, or like an epiphany, rather than more like an epiphany
Mhm.
for himself of how he's going to, I guess, rectify all the issues in his life. Because I didn't really know till you were talking about it, and it makes sense based on other episodes that he was still struggling very much personally with a lot of things, namely drugs. So given that kind of context, it kind of makes sense. See, it was weird. I was taking some of the lyrics more literally, like he was actually talking about music and video or something. Because you could take that literal, meaning out of it too. But
I think you absolutely could.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also
Yeah, this is
randomly, for anybody who cares about this, the nerdy part of me has to reference this. Every time he says blue, blue, I think of the part in Earthbound where you're in, like, I don't know if you've ever played that game, but there's like a
no.
cult that's obsessed with turning things blue, and it gets like really weird and creepy. And for some reason, like they always go blue, blue, and I'm like, oh my god! Like every time I hear that, it's weird.
So
Anyway,
you've always associated this song with that.
with Earthbound, yeah. So
That's
that makes me
incredible.
like it even better.
Yeah. Shout out to Earthbound, by
Yeah.
the way. That's the one with Ness, right?
Yeah, it's the one with S. Yeah. Well, I
Okay.
mean, you were talking before there, like I was telling you, there are moments like
Throughout this
that in this
record.
album where it's like, oh, this could be on like a video game soundtrack, or like, especially with the more ambient pieces, I think like a sci-fi, like an old sci-fi film or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty cool stuff. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry,
sort of like
I digress.
I'm drawing a blank on the movie. The what's it called? The Harrison Ford one.
What, Star Wars? No.
No, not Star Wars.
Blade Runner.
Why can't I think of it? The sequel just came out a few years ago. I haven't seen the
Blade Runner. Is that what you're talking about?
Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name.
Yeah.
Blade Runner. There you go. All right, moving on to track 5. Always crashing in the same car. This is my favorite song off the record, by the way.
I love this song.
This has always been one of my favorite Bowie songs. So this is the song. This is the song I was making reference to with Ricky Gardner before. That guitar solo very much reminds me of like a Fripp guitar solo, sort of like in the vein of maybe like I don't know, like Red Era of the band, Larks, Starless, that type of thing. But I love that guitar solo at the end. It's interesting coming off of our conversation with Sound and Vision. You were saying that you've always interpreted those lyrics as literal. This song is a great example of interpreting it in 2 different ways, and that's intentional. So you do have the literal portion of the song, where this song was about a car accident that Bowie was in the mid 70s. I believe Iggy was actually in the car with him. Story supposedly goes that it was during the cocaine fueled portion of his life, and he was driving his Mercedes, and he was meeting with this drug dealer. Bowie supposedly spotted the drug dealer on the streets, who he believed had ripped him off. So Bowie just repeatedly crashed his Mercedes into the drug dealer's car. Supposedly that's what the song's about. However, going back to the themes of what this record is, on a broader scale, you can look at this song as a metaphor as well too.
Yeah, I think I see where you're taking it. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, the song could be, again, it can be a metaphor on his life, changes, traveling. The line, every chance I take it on the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I've always loved this song, because this is a song that I think has 2 different meanings and that are influenced by both the figurative and the literal. And I've always found that fascinating about this song. I can't think of another song like this one in that aspect. And yeah, I've always been fascinated for that aspect of this song alone. Like I said, I really love the guitar solo in this song. I seem to always have an appreciation for the spoken vocal approach that he takes sometimes, and he takes it on this track, of course. I don't know, man. This kind of like this kind of reminds me of like a Velvet Underground song meets What's to Come. You know, the Velvet's take on post-punk. That's what I get from this song, but with a cool guitar solo. Yeah, this has just always been one of my favorite songs. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, you just had me skipping through it a little bit while you were going there, because got me thinking about those lyrical, that lyrical context. I never really put it together that way, but it makes totally sense. And to kind of go off of that with what you were saying about always crashing in the same car, when I think of like the metaphor of that, it's almost like him saying like, I keep making the same mistakes over and over, like as sort of that kind of metaphor. So yeah, I actually hadn't put that together before, but see, this is why you're more the lyrics guy than I am, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I like the song a lot. I would say as far as like the songs with vocals, I don't mean to separate the album like that, but there are just a lot of those instrumental songs, and then there's the kind of more structured pop kind of songs.
Yeah.
I hate to use the word pop too, because it's not necessarily pop, but it's whatever. But yeah, this is probably, I would say, up there for me too with Sound and Vision, as at least maybe the second best song of the songs with lyrics. Yeah, I really love the song, man. I love all the electronic textures to it. The little like kind of weird riff. I don't know what you would call that, if it's like a synth or if it's guitar. It's kind of like a synthy,
a Moog synthesizer.
Moog, yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah. Just a great track. Awesome.
Yeah. You know, I've you know, just to go off lyrics really quick. You know, because you and I have both been very vocal that we think this man is up there in terms of the Dylans and the Lennon McCartneys and the the Neil Youngs and guys like that who are known to be some of the greatest songwriters. This man is up there. I actually just came across when I was looking up some of the songs that I was texting you to check out that we'll talk about later on Spotify. There's a podcast called Bowie versus Dylan that I want to check out. These two brothers arguing which is the better lyricist. And there's like 45 episodes or something like that.
Wow.
So they go through both their careers. Like the one episode was titled Young Americans versus Blood on the Tracks or something like that. I forget. But I got off track there a little bit. Where I was going with that originally was I've always felt that lyrically, this is one of his 5 best lyrics, in my opinion. His whole catalog. Not necessarily saying one of my top 5 favorite songs. You'll have to wait to find that out. But in terms of lyrics, I think this is one of his 5 best for sure.
Well, I won't comment for myself, but I also hadn't thought of the lyrics too deeply. But you kind of got me wanting to hear the song again, because I kind of want to hear, like, I don't know the lyrics as well as something like Sound and Vision, obviously. But yeah, I always thought the title was always very interesting. Always crashing in the same car.
Always crashing in the same car.
Now that you kind of put that idea in my head, it kind of gives me way different ideas than I had about the lyrics.
It gives you new context and hopefully maybe a new appreciation as well.
Well, yeah, those are always the best songs lyrically, are the ones where they can have multiple different interpretations, right? Yeah,
and that's why I've been so fascinated of the song because of that. So yeah, I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are when we get to the end of this series, whenever that will be. But all right, let's move on to track 6, Be My Wife. This one, I've always liked the sort of like ragtime piano in the opening there. I've always been fascinated by that, as well as the piano in the next track as well that we'll talk about in a sec. Again, I think this song, you listen to it, ties into the themes of loneliness, traveling again. I know I'm sounding redundant at this point. Not being able to settle down. I've also can't help but wonder, and I've read speculation. Some people say yes, some people debunking it and saying no, in the Bowie camp that is. If this song is possibly about Angie Bowie. I believe this is right around the time that they were in the midst of getting a divorce. I had read in the Bowie book I'm reading that Tony Visconti did say that he, around this time, had to break up a fight between Bowie and Angie's then boyfriend, but I think they were still married. They had a weird marriage, David and Bowie. Like that could be a whole episode right there. So I don't know. I think this is a song. This is a song where definitely it's open for interpretation for sure. But what do you think about this track?
On the not really as far as talking about the lyrics. The way he enunciates words. He sounds very English in this song. Do you notice that? He yes, very much is like utilize. It's weird. I don't know if he did that on purpose, trying to sound more. It's almost like he's purposely trying to pronounce it so he sounds more English than he is. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying, and I agree. But it doesn't bother me in a way like it did on the first Bowie album.
Yeah, no, it doesn't bother me at all. I just thought it was interesting that he specifically seemed to be enunciating those words.
Yeah.
To sound more English. Again, kind of for me, I'd say like if I had to pick, maybe a least favorite, it's this one, but it's still a great track. I mean, again, love the electronic textures. Love the sort of the dang, 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 dang. Like
yeah.
This album is great in general and I've mentioned it with pretty much every song, for having those little like melodies, those like little weird kind of interludes there, electronic things. And yeah, I don't know. I just like that, and it's a good song. I like it. I don't really have a ton more to say. It didn't stand out as much as, say, the last two tracks or even like the first song, but it flows well with the rest of the album, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because while it definitely retains the sort of like artsy catchiness, like art pop, I guess, if you will, like the rest of side one does. I would agree it's probably my least favorite, which I still think it's a great song. So for this to be my least favorite really does say something. But it's interesting because I think this was one of the more ones that was played live. I know this one was played live on the Heroes tour, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next episode, and some of the live albums during that period. It's performed live, I believe, during the Sirius Midnight tour. That would have been Let's Dance. It was done live on the Sound and Vision tour, and it was also done live on the Reality tour as well. So he went back and visited this one a lot. I was also reading that there is audio footage of him saying in certain live concerts, I don't know what year, that this is one of his favorite songs. So, take that for what you will. But yeah, I would agree if you were to force me to pick a least favorite, this would be the one. But again, I really do think it's a great track, and I appreciate a lot of these sonic textures and just the overall instrumentation, like the other tracks we've talked about so far.
Yeah, it's hard to. There's so much going on in each track, even a track like this. It's really hard to. And I mean, you heard me. I didn't even list all the instruments that Bowie played. So like, there's really, first of all, I recommend anybody who listens to this listen to it with headphones, because you can really hear more. There's a lot more
this
textures,
is a headphones album for sure.
A lot of layers to it, and well, especially now with the next basically the next half or so of the album that we're going to talk about now, it's very important. A lot of very interesting like electronic textures and sort of ambient sounds and just weird little things that you can that you can appreciate. And they use so many different like electronic instruments. It's very interesting. It's fun trying to like kind of pick out what is being played, it's cool. But
yeah, it's like you can almost say like a song like this and Breaking Glass, it's like prog being done in less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's just very layered music, it's not
right.
It's not overly complicated either. It's just very,
Right.
It's hard. It's like a subtle, to use that term I like to use. It's that kind of subtle complexity.
Subtle complexity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you used that term. I forget for
My
what
coin
song.
term for
The coin turn. You used that on another song we talked about. I don't remember.
I don't remember either. Yeah.
Well said either way. You're just so smart, man. All right, so let's move on to track 7. This is the last track on side 1. Another instrumental, but one that is not technically considered part of the ambient suite.
Which I actually think is a good thing, because I think there is a difference between this song and the ones that follow it. But sorry to interrupt your thought there.
That's okay, and I agree. That track, of course, is a new career in a new town. Also named after the box set that came out a few years ago that I've talked about throughout the series. That I have. These box sets are well worth seeking out throughout Spotify, of course. This one covers, well, the Berlin era, Berlin and Scary Monsters. Anyways, new career in a new town. I was reading in the book that the title of this beautiful track sort of suggests a statement about Bowie's creative resettlement in Berlin. We're going to talk about that a lot when we get into side 2 with where Bowie was coming from with those pieces. But this song is sort of like an example of that. These were the sounds that he heard in his head when he was first getting himself adjusted to his new life in Berlin. I agree with what you were saying when you rudely interrupted me before. I'm kidding. How I've always separated this from the ambient side. This is just more of your traditional, maybe not the right word to use, but traditional instrumental track, but with those layers added on top that we've been talking about that have been occurring throughout this album. The piano reminds me of Mike Garson. It's not Mike Garson, but it very much reminds me of his style. It's very R&B influenced, but again, like you hear like that cold, like Kraftwerk sound layered on top of it.
Yeah, and I think it hints towards this track especially. There's also quite a bit of guitar as well, pretty fuzzy guitar.
Yes, there is.
But I think this really hit, because I was thinking about this. I'm like, what does this remind me of? It sounds a lot. It really, really, really hints as to what the new wave sound was going to sound like to me. But
interesting.
But I don't mean like the really, really. I mean, I guess the kind of early new wave. You know, it hints at like New Order, that kind of sound, like that like early new wave sound, very synthy, kind of has that.
So like more of like those post-punk bands that like obviously pioneered the new wave sound.
Yeah, but the more electronic side of it. So like I said, like the New Order kind of sound. That's the main band I can think of that kind of reminds me.
As opposed to like your Tears for Fears, which Tears for Fears is great, by the way. I'm not
right. Yeah, I mean like that
just
early,
to make a comparison.
The early part of that scene. Yeah, it kind of gives me that kind of vibe, especially with the guitar, like the kind of fuzzy guitar to it, and the percussion is too. Percussion's very interesting on the album, by the way. That's something. It's got that kind of. Not like Lars Ulrich trash can sound, but that kind of, that like kind of crashing percussion. It actually works. It doesn't sound like shit. Like, yeah.
Sorry.
But do you know what I'm saying? It works. It works with the track, and it kind of hints to the kind of that kind of sound that would kind of dominate the 80s. That percussion sound, I guess, that would dominate the 80s. It just sort of hints towards that. You could tell that a lot of bands took from that sound.
I see what you mean. By the way, don't ever reference Lars Ulrich Saint Anger drums ever again, because that will happen. I will just go right into my Saint Anger jam session like I just did there. So for your sake and for the listener's sake moving forward, try to avoid those kind of references.
Okay.
No, but I all joking aside, I do understand what you mean, and I think that's interesting. I see what you mean too with this song sort of pioneering what would become new wave, and again, more of like that New Order sound, even Joy Division
Yeah.
To a degree, I suppose.
But it's got that synthy, you know what I'm saying? It's got that real, like the
Yeah.
synthesizer kind of sound before the synthesizer dominated everything, you know?
That's like terrifying sounding as opposed to being catchy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a great way to close side one, and it gives us a taste. Because while I agree with you, I definitely don't bunch this up with the ambient pieces that are coming. It does give you a little bit of taste of what's to come on side two.
Yeah, I agree.
So for that, I think this track is brilliant for what it serves. Speaking of side two, we ready to move on?
Yep.
All right, man. So side two, track 8, more for a vinyl guy. Side 2, track 1, Warsaw. Now, I just want to point out my pronunciation is correct on that. You guys know that sometimes I tend to mispronunciate things, but the spelling is the spelling of I believe, the Polish enunciation of the word. And I'm not even going to try to say it in Polish, but just know the American translation is Warsaw, spelled W-A-R-S-A-W. But again, on the album, it's spelled the Polish spelling, which is W-A-R-S-Z-A-W-A. Anyways, Warsaw. This is the first ambient instrumental. I was reading in the Bowie book that this was in response to the bleak atmosphere that Bowie got from exploring the city of Warsaw. So just, to be clear again, during this time, he wasn't in Berlin this whole entire time. So this is what he heard in his head when he was in that city. What I really love about this song is I love the contrast of what I can best describe as Eno's sort of funeral-esque synthesizers with Bowie's sort of nonsense vocals.
It's very dark.
It's very dark, right?
Yeah.
Something that we haven't talked about on this show yet is one of Bowie's ways of coming up with lyrics is the lyrical cut up technique. And if you're not familiar with what that is, the lyrical cut up technique is literally taking lyrics, say, from a magazine, a newspaper, a book, and literally cutting it up with a pair of scissors, lining it all up, and just see what you can come up with. Bowie, along with Dylan, were guys that were known for pioneering that, but I know other musicians later on, such as Tom York from Radiohead, used this approach for, I believe, the Kid A album as well as other subsequent records. But so now, while there isn't coherent lyrics in this song, I was reading in the book that what this song is similar with that technique is that this song achieves sort of the musical equivalent to the lyrical cut-up technique that Bowie uses. So instead of lyrics, him and Eno and Tony were taking different recording sessions of the song, chopping it up, and sort of just putting it all together, which is really more or less the approach to ambient music as a whole. That is what ambient music is. It's taking all these different recordings, chopping them up, cutting them up, and just seeing what it sounds like putting it together. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that is actually, it kind of makes you appreciate the track more. See, you're educating me too. This is why he does the research. See, I wouldn't be able to add all this fun fact to it. What I love in this song is this is really where the krautrock influences really come to the forefront, in my opinion. I mean, I could hear I could hear everything from Tangerine Dream, especially with that ambience to it and the darkness to it, to Kraftwerk, bands like Harmonium, and that vocal chanting style reminds me of something like I'm on Duel 2 would do.
Interesting. Okay.
Which was really interesting too. I don't know if Bowie was directly influenced by them or not, but I know he was heavy into that scene. And it's just such a cool ambient, dark piece. It really sets an atmosphere. And to me, it's the longest track on the album, but it does not feel like the longest track. I don't know, the way it transitioned into that kind of weird vocal thing that he does, and that's all him, right? That like he does all
That's
the
all
vocal
him.
tracks
Yeah,
on that,
that's
right?
just him. Mhm.
Yeah, because at first I thought he maybe had like a female singer for the higher parts, and then I'm listening like, no, that's him, that's Bowie. I was like,
Yep.
wow,
Even
like
the overdubs, that's all Bowie.
yeah,
Yeah.
love what he did with vocally on this track. And those electronic textures and the dark atmosphere of it. I can't say enough about this. My favorite track on the
This is
album.
your favorite track.
My
That's
favorite track on
awesome.
the album. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's this is a great favorite one to have. I mean, I agree. Yeah, and that this like you said is the longest track off the record. It doesn't feel like it. It's funny. Just a little quick story, and I know she'll listen to this later on. She's been finally listening to our older episodes. My girlfriend Cass. I
Hi, Cass.
I really, not to go on a tangent here, but it ties in with this song. I really take the album listening experience seriously.
I noticed.
Okay. Some might think that's pretentious. I know a lot of people don't understand that. What I mean by that is I get super, super annoyed if I'm in the middle of listening to a record and I get a tap on my shoulder. I got a tap on my shoulder. I need to tell you something. I need to show you a video or something. You don't know how much that makes me angry because now I've just been taken away from that experience. And maybe I'm old school. I know we live in a world, we're in a generation where we're kind of back in a singles world, right? But to me, listening to a record from start to finish is an experience, it's a journey, it's art. The artist recorded the record the way they did for a reason, because it was meant to be listened to this way. So I asked her this morning, I was like, look, we're recording later. Yeah, this is one of my favorite albums of all time we're talking about, but can you just do me a favor and not talk to me for 40 minutes? Because I just need to listen to this album from start to finish with me, myself, and my cup of coffee. That's it. No distractions. Just sit there with my cup of coffee and just take in this record, right? So I got done doing that, but then I was like, you know what? Now I need to go back and just listen to side 2 again. Yeah. Because I think I have a playlist set up just for side 2 of this one and Heroes, because I think these ambient pieces are sort of an experience in themselves.
I agree,
right?
Yeah.
I said, look, I need another 20 minutes. I'm going to re-listen to side 2. It's roughly 20 minutes. Please leave me alone for another 20 minutes. Okay. I can't, again, not to sound like a pretentious audiophile douche, but if you've got a good amplifier, good headphones, really listen to this side 2 with no distractions. Don't multitask. Don't, Facebook while you're like, just listen to the music. There's just, we've been talking about the layers and everything. There's just so much going on.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the minimalist composer Philip Glass.
Yep.
He actually did
my wife likes
low Hero Symphony, and just recently, 2 years ago, a Lodger Symphony. And I haven't listened to these yet. I'm going to finally make it a point to listen to them. So maybe I'll talk about that at the beginning of the next episode. But the Low Symphony is 3 movements. It's Warsaw, the song I told you to listen to this morning, Some Are, that we'll talk about in a little bit, and Subterraneans. Okay. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that I might argue that this might be Bowie's most important record. And the reason why I think this is because we've talked about what bands were influenced by the glam era, Ziggy, Aladdin Sane, all of that stuff. This, to me, not only pioneered post-punk, new wave, and industrial electronic music, this, to me, pioneered a lot of minimalistic music as well, too. I mean, the fact that you had these composers such as Philip Glass and Steve Vai listening and being inspired by this era of Bowie's music, I think really says something. So this was an important record for Bowie. It was reinventing the wheels, right? But I think influence that this record has still carries on today. And that's why I think this might be his most important record. And I think tracks like Warsaw really validates that claim.
Yeah, and he has a way of we always use that other term on the series, Bowify.
Bowify, that was the term I was looking for before, by the way.
And he managed to, and granted, I know Eno was a big part of especially this track, but it says a lot that he was able to even Bowify the German electronic scene, you know, because while you could tell the influences and everything, you could tell that he was listening to a lot of Neu! And Tangerine Dream and Kraftwerk and all these other bands that we've talked about. He made it his own at the same time.
Totally.
Which goes to show again how much of a genius the man was, that he was able to take even something as kind of odd and different as that German electronic scene and doing his own thing with that too, which is a big thing. Also, by the way, on your whole spiel about listening to music, I'm not quite as intense. And in fact, one thing I kind of disagreed with is that I actually need something to do when I'm listening to music, but I especially like to listen to it, for example, like if I'm doing some kind of work, because if I can do something, like my job is pretty hands-on and physical.
Yeah.
So I do the same routine. So I kind of just get in the rhythm of that, and then I can escape into the music. So
not saying I don't do that, because I very much do that too, whether I'm working or even gaming sometimes, like the game I'm playing right now, I'm just doing side quests. I'll listen to music while I'm doing that. Not saying that I don't do that.
But I totally can relate, maybe a little less intense, but to the whole, it's an experience. Sit down, you know, I still really, really believe in that. And I mean, who wants to get, you know, anybody who's a fan of, you know, a show, or like you're a big movie person, you don't want to be like midway through the scene in Jurassic Park where the T-Rex is tearing down the electric fence and somebody calls you. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm in the middle of this here. I'm not answering that phone. You know, it's the same deal with an album. If you're really into music, the best way to do it is if you have that time to yourself and you can isolate yourself. And now I even get annoyed when I'm at work and somebody asks me something and it's like, I'm in the middle of the song, you know?
Come on, yeah. And you know, like, just be clear too, it doesn't even have to be like, you know, headphones. Like that's why I loved commuting so much, because that's my time. It's just me in the car.
I totally agree.
That's a great way of experiencing music as well too.
And like, for example, with this album, especially an album like this, but throughout this whole series, I didn't feel like I actually listened to the album until I was listening to it on headphones, because you can really, or like you said, the only substitute would be some really, really, really good speakers if you got them. But the easiest way is headphones, because you hear so much more of the music. That being said, I think I would definitely agree with most of what you were saying with the with this, especially a track like this. I think that it's super important what Bowie was doing here, and I think he was innovating a lot. And also, I would say this is why people need to look into these krautrock bands that he was inspired by, because this is an album that is lauded and everybody loves it, but it wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Tangerine Dreams and the Kraftwerks and the Amonduls and the Can. Like, that stuff influenced this too, and it drives me crazy when those bands don't get their due that they so rightly deserve. But anyway, sorry, we went on a tangent, but
we both went on a tangent. So
for me, this is for me, this is the best track on the album. I always love that songs that have that dark sound. You know, it even hints to me a little bit of what King Crimson would do later. I thought of them, our other big band that we analyzed. You know, it reminds me of, and some of the other tracks here that we'll get into reminds me of some of that sound you'd hear on Discipline. I forget which. I'm trying to remember which track it was coming up here, but it reminded me of something off of Discipline.
Interesting.
I'll try to remember it, but anyway.
Let me know which one. I'm trying to think what song that I would compare this one to on Discipline. I don't know.
It wasn't this song. It was another song. I think it was. Well, we'll get into it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Also, the other thing, and then we'll finally move on, is Joy Division. We've been kind of name dropping them quite a bit this episode. Originally, their name was Warsaw, which was from this song.
Oh, yep, that I did know.
Like that's what I'm saying. Like this record created Joy Division. That's wild to, you know, like when you like really think about it. But all right, so let's move on here. Track 9 of side 2. I've always gone back and forth with the pronunciation if it's Art Decade or Art Decade. I have finally come to the consensus it is Art Decade, and that is because, like Warsaw being influenced by his experience in Warsaw, Art Decade is in response to his time in West Berlin. This is right around the time when the Berlin Wall was getting ready to be knocked down there. Mm-hmm. And this song was sort of like the music he was hearing in his head walking around the streets of West Berlin. During this time, it was a city cut off from art and culture. Art decayed, hence Art Decade, right?
Right.
Nice this time. One, I think, is probably the spookiest sounding song on the record.
I love this track.
Has this like hauntingly sparse instrumentation, mm-hmm. but there's also this really beautiful cello as well. I forget the name of the cello. Cello, is it pronounced cello? Whatever. I forget the name of the person playing the cello on this record.
My wife plays the cello, and
that's right. Yeah.
We listened to this album. She really liked it, by the way. Mm-hmm. And she always appreciates the cello, so she seemed pretty into it. And I know she likes Philip Glass too, so I'm gonna have to tell her about that suite, which I've been meaning to listen to as well. But yeah, it's very the cello is a cool contrast to the weird
this electronic instrumentation,
the electronic stuff that's going on in this track. Yeah, drink that beer.
I was hoping you were to keep talking while I was drinking.
We both love this album. If you can't tell, we're excited.
Yeah, I mean it's all right. No.
Yeah,
but I mean I don't really have a whole lot to say about this song other than that. I think again it's another great piece.
Follows Warsaw very well too. With
absolutely,
that, it going does. On with that dark tone.
I almost have a hard time listening to these 4 tracks on their own, mm-hmm. with the exception of Subterraneans.
It's funny because that you mentioned that, because I had briefly thought, and then I was like, nah, because the more I was listening to it, I was like, nah, we shouldn't do that. But initially I was like, I wonder if we should just talk about all the instrumentals as one piece, because I almost feel like they flow well, but they're also different enough, I think, that it warranted talking about them separately. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
To reiterate what you're trying to say there, basically.
No, so I think that's a good way of putting it. They definitely warrant being talked about on their own. But from a listening point of view, I think they're meant to be listened together, whether you're listening to all of Low or just side 2. Because like I said, you could just side 2 is an experience in of itself. Mm-hmm. Coming off of my album experience tangent, yes, I think this works great as a whole, but you really could just listen to these 4 songs.
It's funny you mentioned
it's its own unique experience.
Well, you mentioned it before. I actually did the same thing, and I did it today about just listening to the instrumental pieces back to back. It's almost like it's 2 different albums in one, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Like the 2 different sides are kind of, they have different vibes to them, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I know we moved on from it, but I have one more thing.
Sure.
One more interesting thing about Warsaw. So here we go, going back to that song. There's this really neat performance that you should check out if you haven't already on YouTube. I believe it was on the Heathen tour. It's Bowie performing Low in its entirety for the most part. So when I say for the most part, what I mean is Weeping Wall's the only song that's not performed. But he opens with Warsaw. but it works. There's something about the way Warsaw goes into Speed of Life that just works, right? So again, we said Warsaw is this very dark, ambient piece, and just the transition to the end of that song to the bow 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 bow. Just I don't know. It's just like
I actually could see that. Yeah, it jumping.
Yeah.
That makes me think of like we always reference them, but I have to. Like that makes me think of something like Lark's Tongues, where like the beginning of that piece, how it starts out kind of slow and kind of ambient, and then it's like da na 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 na.
That's like
it
exactly
comes
what
with that kind of
is.
heavy thing. Yeah, I could see that working. Totally.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is. So if you haven't watched that, check it out. Like I said, it's low in its entirety for the most part. Starting out with Warsaw, and for some reason, Weeping Wall is the only song left out. But speaking of, if you don't have anything else to add to Art Decade,
Yep.
track 10, Weeping Wall. Again, hearing the music in his head with, his experience during this time. This track has supposedly been described by Bowie as intending to evoke the misery of the Berlin Wall itself, being a portrait piece like the other music on side 2 of Low. What I really like about this song is I mentioned Steve Vai before, another minimalist composer. This song kind of reminds me of his compositions a little bit. But interesting enough about this song that I did not know until today, actually. All the instrumentals are done by Bowie in this track. Every single one.
Wow, that's
the guitar, literally everything you hear is played by Bowie on this track.
It's
solely credited to him. Yeah.
It's kind of got like kind of an empty-ish sort of sound, and it also has kind of, compared to the 2 tracks before it, the textures are a bit lighter. It reminds me of more of like a Noi, like maybe Noi 75 kind of. I'm sorry to always bring up those bands, but it really does remind me of like Noi or like a Kraftwerk kind of.
They're great comparisons. Yeah,
I would say more than any other tune, this one reminds me of, like, you could tell he definitely took a play out of their book there. It has that kind of like those lighter textures of particularly Noi. It actually made me think of. Yeah, but it's
interesting.
Awesome track. I'm very impressed that he did all the because I thought this would have been more Eno, but I'm actually very surprised.
You would think, right? Yeah, just from listening to it. Having said all of that, and again, it's pretty cool to hear that it's all Bowie on this one. It's probably my least favorite out of these 4 pieces.
Of these 4, probably,
yeah. Yeah. So not only thinking about that and knowing that Bowie was the one that recorded all the instruments, I wonder why they left this one out when they played this one live back in 2002. Makes you wonder. But anyways, yeah, I mean, that's really all I have, to say about this one.
If that being said, it may not be as good to me as the other 3, but it still flows well with the rest of the pieces.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it has its place.
We talked about Philip Glass and him doing the Low and Hero Symphony. I very much view these 4 pieces as a musical movement. So it definitely works as like a third movement, and it goes very well into what is the finale, and that of course is Subterranean. This one supposedly was recorded for the Man Who Fell to Earth soundtrack, possibly going as far back as 1975. This one is mostly instrumental with brief, obscure lyrics near the end of the song. I love the vocals that Bowie does with this one. There's almost, the best way I can describe the saxophone is it's almost very faint sounding, right? Gives it sort of like a melancholy vibe. And that is for sure. I know we're always like, when we hear sax, we're like, is that Bowie playing sax? Is it not? This for sure is Bowie playing saxophone on this particular track. I just think this is a great way to end the record. It makes me want to check out that Philip Glass symphony that much more. because this is the first movement for the Low Symphony. So it's interesting because, you know, this is the closing track off the album. The soundscapes kind of give it like the cinematic quality. The best way I can compare it is in my head, it reminds me of In a Silent Way by Miles Davis, which is my favorite Miles Davis album. So I think that's why I've always loved this track, and why I think out of the four, this is the one I can listen to on its own. Because it just reminds me of that style of In the Silent Way so much. So for that alone, I just appreciate this track. If you haven't picked up on it already, this is my favorite song on side 2, and probably overall one of my favorites off the record.
It's definitely really, really good. It's also kind of got a bit more of that dark sound. And actually, this is the song that reminded me of the 80s King Crimson. In fact, specifically a track, it reminds me a little bit of The Sheltering Sky off of Discipline. So listen to this, and then listen to The Sheltering Sky off of Discipline.
That was the one that came to my head too when you said that before, when you were making the comparison with Warsaw. Sheltering Sky was the song that came to my head.
Again, sorry to go back to King Crimson all the time,
okay.
but it was our first, it was our first thing. But yeah, you could tell even they, you know, they obviously took a lot from this period of Bowie. And I mean, it makes sense because Fripp obviously would join Bowie very shortly after. But like you said, I love the saxophone in this track. It kind of goes back to a bit darker than the previous track, kind of back to what it was on the other two. And really great way to close the album, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is. You know, again, it just, I feel like we haven't made it clear enough the importance of Eno on this record. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, as ambitious as Bowie was, and, you know, all the way to the end of his career, a lot of this came from Eno, especially a lot of the German influence. Again, I know you especially have been really like making it a point to emphasize the importance of these krautrock bands that really were heavily influenced on this record. A lot of that came from Eno too. I mean, Bowie was listening to this stuff. I mean, he showed us that as far back as, you know, Station, but Eno brought in a lot of that influence too. I mean, Eno was working with a lot of those guys.
Yeah, he jammed with Harmonium.
Yeah.
So like he recorded and stuff. He was in Germany, I think, before Bowie, right? I don't know.
I believe so. Yeah. I'm not sure, but I mean, either way, his contributions to this record, you know, are every bit as detrimental as Bowie's. And then, you know, add Visconti back to the mix too. You know, we've talked about that. You know, he hasn't always been as heavily involved on you know, certain periods of you know, Bowie's career, but he was very much, you know, on board on the you know, producing realm of things during the Berlin era for sure. So
he's pretty much back in full force here.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, what a way to close this record. I think Subterranean also really sets up Heroes as well. I've always looked at Heroes as very much the continuation of this record. If you guys aren't familiar with the next record, Heroes is very much in the same setup, I guess, if you will, as this record is, being that side 1 is the more poppier side with lyrics, whereas side 2 is also an ambient instrumental side as well. Some might argue that Heroes is the better of the two. You'll just have to wait to find out our thoughts. But just to give you a little sneak preview of what's to come.
This album seems to have gotten a lot more notoriety over the years, though, than Heroes.
It's the highest rated on Rate Your Music.
Yeah.
If, you know, you take that for what you will, but, you know.
Well, Rate Your Music tends to compromise the really hardcore music fans. So,
sure.
I mean, I'll take their list over. I'll take like a list on Rate Your Music before Rolling Stone any day, for example.
In a heartbeat. Right?
So I kind of trust that community a little bit more but yeah, Low is a very, very important record, especially at the very least in Bowie's career, but I would say overall in music as well. It was a really important album, especially for this time period.
And I want to put a pause for a second there because I want to say final thoughts for the end.
Okay.
But before we do get into our final thoughts, let's talk about bonus tracks.
Okay.
We'll do our usual top 3 picks.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
And then we'll do final thoughts, of course.
Okay.
So a couple bonus tracks. Something I got to get better with is when I know there's going to be bonus tracks or B-sides that are actually worth checking out. I need to give you a fair notice.
Yeah, you sent me 2 of these today on short notice, but I've still, at least I was able to listen to them once. It's better than not at all.
To give you guys some behind the scenes, I had texted you at like 11:30 this morning for the one track. I was like, check this song out, and then the other one I literally texted you an hour before.
Yeah.
I'm like, I forgot to tell you to check this one out too.
Luckily, I still had time at work, so I listened to them.
Yeah. But anyway, so the first one is one I really wanted to talk about for a second here. We've talked about some deeper cuts. We were really big on that in the Crimson series. Bowie's got some really cool deep cuts that even I've been discovering as we've been doing this series. I think the biggest discovery for me was the track Bombers on the Hunky Dory episode. But this is a song I've always known about, and it's a favorite. And it's a track called Some Are. To give you some background on Some Are, this was a low outtake. However, it was rumored to be recorded as far back as 1975 for the man who fell to Earth soundtrack. Bowie has kind of debunked that, but again, you can't really take Bowie for his word when it's all things 75 to 77, so it's a little hazy. But anyways, this, I get why this song didn't make the record. You guys know I'm really into sequencing. I've always tried to come up with a sequencing, including this song on the record, and I just can't get it to work. Because
it would be so good on the album, though.
It would be so good, right? But Low is already just sequenced so well that I already think it's perfect. But boy, this song would have fit very well on Low for sure.
It would have, and I agree with what you're saying about the sequencing. But at the same time, Low is only like a 35-minute album or so. It's a pretty short album. If it could be fit in somewhere, it would really add to the album, I think. At least this track.
I'm trying to think. In the past, I think I've tried putting it after Always Crashing in the Same Car. I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to sequence the song onto that record, but I love this song. I mean, what you hear is definitely a rough mix of it, but I almost want to change it. I love how sort of breathy Bowie's vocals are. It's the best way I can describe it. I would argue that this might be darker than any song off Low, and that's really saying something because we just got done talking about how sort of cold that album is. But
at the same time, though, the song it also has a bit of an intimacy. Like I don't know, I like the way he sings it, and I like the way he sings it while the sort of vocal melody is playing underneath on some synth or whatever, some electronic synth. It was really cool. I actually had a minute at work, and when you sent me this, I had my headphones on, and I just sat back and closed my eyes and listened to the song, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I really really feel like the album, again, we'll save it for final thoughts, but I don't think it needs it, but I think it also would have added to it as well.
I think so.
I really liked this one. More so than the other one you sent, but the other one, and I don't know if you want to transition or if you have more to say here on this, but the other one you sent, it kind of falls under what you were saying before about the other instrumental pieces where you felt like they all should have been listened to in sequence. I feel like this belongs in a sequence somewhere. It sounded really good, but it couldn't really stand on its own like the first track here, which I'm blanking out on the name because I just found out about it. Some Are stood on its own way better than All Saints, the other one.
Some Are definitely stands better on its own. I for the life of me,
don't know where to
can't
put
figure
it.
out where it could fit on Low. You know, and that just
Yeah.
again goes to show you how great Low is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The other thing about Some Are is you can find it. I've talked about this compilation album before. The album I Select that came out, I think in like 2008. I've talked about this one before. It's basically a compilation album that Bowie took to put together himself of his favorite tracks, and the liner notes are well worth reading. You could find them online, and Some Are is on the I Select album, so you can listen to it that way. It's on Spotify. So it's you know it's worth checking out.
Mm-hmm.
That album also has what does that have? I'm blanking. Diamond Dogs. What's that song we both love? Why am I
Oh,
blanking?
Sweet Thing.
Sweet Thing. Thank you.
Oh, it has the
it's got
complete.
the mix where it's got the three together. The Bellway Brothers is on there. So many great deeper cut Bowie tracks, but Some Are is on there as well too.
Mm-hmm.
As far as All Saints go, I agree with what you were saying. I don't. It's a cool instrumental. I like it a lot actually.
It is, yeah.
I don't think it fits on Low. To be perfectly honest with you,
yeah.
I also agree with what you were saying. Like, feels like it needs to be part of something else. I just don't think being part of the ambient side of Low is where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an album that was put out a while ago called All Saints, actually, that just strictly has Bowie instrumentals from Low, Heroes, and The Buddha of Siberia.
Mm-hmm.
And then this song is on there as well, too. I listened to that once years ago. If you're really into like the ambient Bowie stuff, it's worth checking out. So I think from what I remember, it kind of worked better in that context a little bit.
That makes sense.
It's a cool track. Also, supposedly was an outtake for The Man Who Fell to Earth. And then we also have on the 1991 Rico disc version of Low as a remix of Sound and Vision. It's not that great. I don't recommend checking it out. There's more sax on it, but it just kind of just kills the rest of the mixing of that song.
It's the song. That song is pretty perfect in my opinion.
As we both just got done saying.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the greatest recordings ever. So don't listen to it. All right, give me a top three, buddy.
Okay. In order, Warsaw. It's my favorite track. Sound and Vision. I don't care that it's cliche. And I'm stuck on the third one. I want to say I'm gonna go for the oddball one. I'm gonna say Art Decade.
That's awesome.
That one. I will say for me. Well, actually, I'll let you say your top three, and then I'll go to my final thoughts.
So my number one would be Always Crashing in the Same Car.
Okay, kind of not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, my number two would also be Sound and Vision. I don't think it's cliche, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a great song. It's just a great song.
Yeah.
So that'd be my number two, and then Subterranean would be my number three.
That was the one I was wrestling with for third. I wasn't sure. I was like,
It's hard. This is a hard one to rank because Warsaw would be like a very close number four.
But overall, listen to the whole album as a piece. Not like it's hard to just pick individual tracks on an album like this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of throughout going through the record kind of summed up my final thoughts, and I'm going to stand by what I said.
Same.
I really do think it's the most important record in the man's catalog, even over Ziggy Stardust, even more some of the more commercially, successful albums such as Let's Dance. This one was artistic reinvention, right? This has always been a guy that's always evolved. Having said that, I think said in the last episode that we would still be talking about Bowie as a legend if his career was just from like up to Diamond Dogs, right?
Mm-hmm,
like that's still an incredible body of work in of itself. But you got to evolve at some point, right?
Yeah.
And he very much did that, even if it wasn't the greatest start. I mean, Young American's kind of where it started, and that was just an okay record. Station to Station, we really kind of hear the transition. And while that's my favorite Bowie record, I think this one really is the most important. like I said, not only for him and where he would go all the way to the very end with Black Star, but the influence that just this record alone had. I mean, like I said,
A
this
lot of
record,
different genres.
right? Yeah, this record created Joy Division. That's just crazy to me. And just the overall influence it had on what was to come in the late 70s and the 80s with post-punk and new wave and all throughout alternative rock, you name it, whatever. A lot of that comes from this record. This for me is a 10 out of 10 record along with Station to Station. I really can't, and maybe because I'm biased, I can't really pinpoint any flaws that this record has, at least to me. I love this record. I think, I talked about in the first couple episodes, my background with Bowie and how I got into Bowie with like The Next Day was on heavy rotation. This was my most listened to record during that time period when I was going through what I was going through. So I kind of, now it's hard for me to go back and listen to this one because I associate with a period in my life. But I still get a sense of joy when I listen to this record too, just because I think the music is just that good, I mean, like, this is really one of those albums that takes you on a musical journey, and a fun one at that, even if I have some negative associations.
One way you could,
as well.
Just gonna say, one way you could reframe that is that this album got you through a hard time, so it actually was like a good, it was like a really good experience for you in a time that was difficult. So
sure. You know what? And I can't believe it took me all these years to put it together. We talked about how this one was kind of like exploration and, figuring out life. That's what I was going through during that time period. So
there you go. There you go.
That's not the perfect soundtrack. I don't know what is, but final thoughts. Enough about me.
I don't think I have as much of a personal attachment to this one as you do, or maybe even with other albums with Bowie, because this one, again, I know our experience, we've talked about this many times, but our experience in discovering the man's music was different. But that being said, I would also agree this is I'd say at least one of his most important albums, and certainly probably like up there with as far as, I would say it's pretty much on the top of the list of his most unique albums, especially a lot of songs, like those songs like you said, Always Crashing the Same Car and Sound and Vision, where he really took those German influences and those electronic influences, kind of made those his own, and then put his kind of Bowie pop twist on it to develop a completely unique sound, and even the instrumental pieces that were done. I mean, yes, was heavily involved in those, but they were done in a very unique way as well, and just have their own different sound to them as well, which I think is awesome, and I think says a lot about what the man was capable of in terms of, musical diversity, and just, as we always talk about, him being a chameleon, being able to leave his mark on just about any genre he kind of tries to Bowify, I guess. But yeah, I would definitely say in terms of influence, you're definitely right about the impact that the album had and how important it was for a lot of different scenes that followed it. Art rock, new wave, post-punk, even composers like you said, guys like really famous guys like Philip Glass and stuff, all cite this as like a really important record. As far as my personal taste, it's probably my second or third favorite album. I would give it probably like a 9.5 or 10 out of 10. It's somewhere
to be honest with you, I didn't even realize it was ranked that high for you. So that's pretty cool.
Yep. I didn't know if you knew that, but it's second or third favorite, maybe second. It's close there. But yeah, I totally agree. It's a really, really amazing album, really unique, and I enjoyed it. And the one thing that I will add, I will say, if you were to divide, because I think a lot of people kind of divide this record in half. I think it's great as one piece, but there's this sort of, there's a couple instrumentals in there, but the first side has more of like the vocals and stuff, and the second side is the more instrumental ambient stuff. If I had to pick, I love the instrumental ambient side. If I had to pick, I love that part of it. So I'm very much looking forward to going into Heroes, which is now my Don't Know as well, and really diving back into those instrumental pieces and hearing more of that kind of Bowie sound, because I love that sound. So
yeah, it's it's hard for me to pick which side I like better, because they're like I said, like they're different experiences in of themselves. Like you can, like I said, you could just listen to side two, but you could also just listen to side one.
I agree.
I guess overall, I would have to say side two, but
it's hard.
It's just incredible, man.
It is,
really is.
It is all just one album. So.
Yeah. Well, bottom line, right? But even like those two instrumentals that are on side one, they're more in the vein of side one, just of course in instrumental form. But yeah, it's an incredible record.
Yeah, it really is a great record. Like I said, it's I'm not sure whether to give it a 10. I kind of want to. I still love Diamond Dogs. Again, personal preference, like you're saying, like probably Low is the objectively better one and had more of the impact than Diamond Dogs. But for me, Diamond Dogs is still my number one. But yeah, it's again just so weird and so unique, and that's what I love.
Sure.
That's what I love in my Bowie music, when he does stuff that's so different, but still undeniably him.
It's all about personal preference at the end of the day, because just spoiler alert, I'll go on record and say already, while I might think Heroes is probably the better record, both side one and side two, I still prefer Low. So it's all about your own personal taste at the end of the day. But that's that. I hear birds. I think every episode we've recorded, at some point you hear my birds.
Well, at least they're soothing.
Sure.
That's all I have, man.
That's all I have too.
Awesome I think looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to the next one. The next record's going to be great as well. We do have 2 live albums that we'll briefly talk about as well. We won't go as in depth into those like we do studio albums, but stay tuned for that. Heroes, and then Lodger will be right after. But yeah, guys, this is one where I say not only check out this record, listen to the bonus tracks too. Listen to Tomar and All Saints. They're great as well. And yeah, that's all I got. We don't end these things very well.
we need an intro. We need an outro. Thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate it, as always. We're delighted that we're going to be able to now do the Bowie episodes on video. We will still have the audio tracks, so if you're watching this, expect to see, if you want, again, better audio quality, as I said in the beginning of this episode, check us out on the various different podcast platforms. We do have a Twitter now. Follow us, please. It should just be, if you just look up Sound of Music, you should find us.
Sound of Music, yeah.
It's also linked to our YouTube page, and I think the podcast page, don't remember, but we do have a Twitter. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Check us out on YouTube. If you're like me and you don't want to rely on the internet, check us out on Spotify, Apple Music, or any other podcast app you listen to. Download that shit offline, and see you soon, guys.
Peace. Later, guys. All right, I'm going to end this and then just call you on the Discord real quick and then probably head out.